It's time now for French Connections, our weekly look at the intricacies of life here in France. This week, we're going to focus on domestic violence against women. This isn't something specific to France, but there has been mounting outrage over the number of women killed by their partners or former partners.
That's right. Sadly, there's nothing new about domestic violence in France, which is violence conjugale. It's our word du jour. But this certainly has been in the spotlight recently here in France. It seems like there is mounting outrage that is part of a broader awakening that we're seeing in France over the plight of women. There's a collective effort by associations for battered women, experts, the government, the media, to raise awareness about the issue and stop the indifference.
What is the situation in France exactly?
Well, there are an estimated 220,000 incidents of physical or sexual violence within couples every year. And France is actually one of the European countries with the highest number of femicides, just after Germany. You can see it here. In 2018, 121 women were killed by their partners or their former partners. And you can see that is the equivalent of one murder every 3 days.
The statistic is astounding, but in many cases, victims filed multiple complaints before things ended in tragedy.
Unfortunately, it's often the same story where violence builds up over months, over years, and too often women are too afraid to speak about it, to go and see the authorities, and when they do, sometimes they aren't actually heard. In fact, our reporters from France 24, Catherine Norris-Trent and Julie Dungelhoff, went to Corsica, where they met with the parents of a woman, Julie Dweeb, a young mother who was killed in March 2019. Take a listen.
Je pense qu'au minimum, elle a fait entre 6 et 7 plaintes. Ils me posent des questions, quand, comment, où, à quelle heure. Voilà, après, c'est eux.
Ils ne donnent pas de solution.
Voilà.
Quand elle avait déjà été portée plainte, alors, elle avait dit aux gendarmes, vous savez, il a une arme. Et elle fait, mais il faut vraiment qu'il me tue pour que vous me preniez au sérieux. Voilà. Pour qu'on me prenne au sérieux, il faut qu'on me tue.
Now, there are measures out there to protect battered women, laws, restraining orders, emergency telephone lines to alert the police, a special hotline, but clearly, Flo, the system isn't working.
Now, keep in mind, there are competent officials out there who are well trained, but it's not systematic or consistent. It's kind of the luck of the draw. In fact, the president, Emmanuel Macron, witnessed this firsthand while visiting the office of this hotline. You can see the number there, 3919. It's a domestic violence hotline that's been around since 2014. Now, while he was there, he listened in to a conversation. A woman who had decided to leave her husband called the hotline, her abusive husband, it must be said, and she told the hotline operators that the police were refusing to assist her. In fact, the police officer got on the line to explain why he didn't want to help her. The president was listening in. He was very shocked by this. Now, an investigation has been opened into this particular incident, but once again, it raises questions about how victims are treated. Take a listen.
The first time I filed a complaint, the police officer made me feel like I was guilty, not like I was a victim. I felt like I was bothering them, like they had better things to do.
Look, we're only human, so sometimes in the moment we're tired. Sometimes we spend a bit less time. Maybe we're a bit less understanding. But here, we always try to be as welcoming as possible.
Now facing mounting pressure from experts and associations, the government organized a major consultation on domestic violence, grouping dozens of ministers, judges, police officers, victims, relatives, and representatives of feminist groups.
And the conference was spearheaded by France's Minister of Gender Equality, Marlène Schiappa. Now, associations had been calling for a major Marshall Plan on the issue, and what the government did was announce a series of measures to get tough on domestic violence. Let's take a look at a couple of them here. They want to create 1,000 new places in shelters for the victims of domestic violence, the wide-scale use of electronic bracelets to prevent domestic violence offenders from approaching their victims. They also want to make it easier for battered women to file a complaint, a criminal complaint, for instance, directly from a hospital. And then also, and this is a major issue, to train police and authorities to better identify cases of domestic abuse.
Indeed. Now, other measures include removing parental visitation protection rights from offenders and fast-tracking legal proceedings.
That's right. The idea is to accelerate the justice system by designating specific and specialized investigating judges and prosecutors. Now, what's interesting is many people in France look at what's happening in neighboring Spain as an example that we should follow here, because the issue of fighting domestic violence has been a national priority in Spain for over a decade, and special judges have been trained there with the power to process suspected cases of domestic violence within 72 hours. So it's a much quicker system. And clearly the system in Spain is working because the number of women killed has dropped 40% in the last 10 years. So people in France say this is the example we should be following. Now, feminist groups here in France have welcomed the government's recent efforts to tackle the issue, but point out that what's actually needed is money, is government funds. We can talk all we want about this issue, but no major change will happen without a major investment.
We need to change the mentalities and behavior of 60 million people in this country. Piling on measures won't do that. We need a global policy that tackles everything, starting with education.
We feel like the government is becoming aware of the task at hand, but the Prime Minister says it's not a question of financial means. So clearly we have some work to do.
But the question that many feminist groups are asking is just how many victims is it going to take before we see real change here in France? If you're interested about this topic, I do recommend checking out a special episode of The 51% hosted by Annette Young. You can see it here on our website.
Thank you very much for that, Flo. That wraps up this edition of French Connections. In the meantime, you can tweet your questions to Flo at Florence Villeminot and check out our website. The address is france24.com.